Antebellum Boston made a rapid response. On the summer morning when Justice Edward G. Loring, in adherence to the fugitive slave law, condemned Anthony Burns to return to slavery only 5 days after he was first arrested, an estimated 50,000 protesters lined the streets in witness and outrage. Bostonians draped buildings in funereal black bunting and flew flags upside down. Crowds yelled, "Shame! Shame!" and "Kidnappers!" at the column of 2,000 troops that marched the captive from the courthouse to the waterfront. A coffin painted black with the word Liberty in white hung above State Street. When the troops marched below the offices of the Boston Commonwealth newspaper, they were showered with cayenne pepper from several stories up, and a bottle of sulfuric acid crashed into the rear section. But such attempts to disrupt the formation failed. Protesters met the soldiers at Long Wharf, crammed onto the wharves and vessels in the harbor, until Boston's waterways were as crowded as the streets had been. They delayed the departure of the steamship John Taylor, with Anthony Burns chained below, but did not prevent it. In a single day, Reverend Leonard Grimes of Boston's 12th Baptist Church raised $1,300 for Burns's redemption and retrieval to a free life. In this first real test of the fugitive slave law, Burns became at once a symbol of abolition's collective might and also its relative powerlessness. He was not the first man to be recaptured under this law, but he was the first fugitive whose re-enslavement abolitionists could not prevent, either by legal means or by force. Acting quickly, Stone and his committee organized these activists and crowds into audiences for lectures. Moderate white Bostonians found that their position on the slavery question had been tested by the fugitive slave law, and they wanted further education in the movement. Stone presented a lecture series on the slavery question at Tremont Temple, and it was Boston's most successful to date. Tickets sold out for speakers such as William Lloyd Garrison, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Wendell Phillips. Senator Sumner had been slated to appear first in the series, but illness postponed his appearance until the spring of 1855, when he would appear last. This delay, as he wrote to Stone, might have been serendipitous, for in the interim he had met a bright and intelligent girl, and her presence among us in Boston will be a great deal more effective than any speech I could make. Now, on stage, he turned to look at her, sitting next to Burns, then turned back to the crowd. Or the deadly injury to morals in substituting concubinage for marriage and changing the whole land of slavery into a byword of shame. Sumner risked censure by uttering this last impropriety. Sexual slavery was not openly spoken of in antebellum Boston. Sumner gestured to the girl to join him at the podium. She hopped down from her seat and walked across the platform to stand alongside his knee. She nodded up at him, then turned with a still face to the audience. The girl needed no introduction. The assembled crowd knew her as the White Slave, or Little Ida May. According to the newspapers, she and her family had been enslaved in Virginia. Now, thanks to Sumner, she was free. To the sound of applause, Mary Mildred Williams retook her seat. This moment was the culmination of a publicity campaign around Mary that used photography to question the construct of race in the context of slavery. Mary was 7 years old when anti-slavery activists had her photographed and exhibited as evidence that slavery was not racially bound. When she first met Senator Sumner in Washington in the spring of 1855, she reminded him of the kidnapped heroine in an anti-slavery novel called Ida May, A Story of Things Actual and Possible, published 3 months earlier. In the novel, 5-year-old Ida May, a white child from Pennsylvania, is stolen, beaten unconscious, and sold across state lines. She is raised as a slave in South Carolina until her identity is recovered 8 years later. The plot of Ida May was like Solomon Northup's 12 Years a Slave, told from a girl's perspective, and it fictionalized a national fear that under the fugitive slave law, free children would be kidnapped and sold into slavery, just as Solomon Northup had been. Trouble was, not everyone believed such a thing was possible, which was why Sumner introduced Mary to the American public. Meanwhile, I send this picture, Sumner had written to Dr. Stone on February 19, thinking that you will be glad to exhibit it among the legislature as an illustration of slavery. Let a hard-hearted hunker look at it and